All right, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. Today, I want to talk about gun control, the NFA, some of the larger federal gun control laws, the history of them, where they come from, and kind of where we are now. So it starts with the NFA, which was passed in 1934. And to give you a little bit of background, the early 20th century was a time of reform. There were a lot of things that were changing. There was two important to the story: the temperance movement and the women's suffrage movement. Largely women who are pushing the temperance movement. As women gained the right to vote in 1920, they very quickly kind of sway the scales and push through what becomes now the prohibition movement. Prohibition goes through with that large base of voters now being added to the pool. And with prohibition, we get arguably the first large scale organized crime in the United States with bootleggers. And it's this time period, it's these sets of criminals that the NFA was targeted at to try to stop these criminals from having access to the weapons that they were committing these crimes with, which was mostly, for the record, handguns. And we'll talk about why that's important in a minute. But the NFA, just as a little bit of background, covers a bunch of restrictive items. So, short-barreled rifles and short-barreled shotguns. At the time the NFA was passed, the minimum barrel length for both a rifle and a shotgun was 18 inches. Anything shorter than that had to be registered with the government. You had to go through a further background check and pay $200 for a tax stamp. Now, $200 in 1934 is a lot of money. So when we get to the other stuff like machine guns and suppressors, which it also regulated, it would be a $200 tax stamp on something like a $3 suppressor. So the tax was there to be a prohibitively expensive part of still being allowed, legally allowed to own these items. So they wanted to ban handguns, and that was originally in the original bill was handguns were going to be illegal. And people lobbied against this and said, well, that's against that, violates our rights, it's against the Second Amendment. So they took that out. The minimum barrel lengths were really only in there to prevent people from taking a long gun and cutting down the barrel and then cutting off the stock and saying, still having something concealable. But if they were pulled over or whatever, they could say, oh no, officer, this is clearly not a pistol, it's a rifle, look. But you still have something short come back, which you conceal. That's what they wanted to prevent with those minimum barrel lengths. But when the handgun part was taken out, the minimum barrel length part was left in. So it's kind of a vestigial part of an earlier version of the bill. Gun control largely stays the same for a long time. There's not any large-scale bills that get passed for quite a while. There's a couple changes that happen, most notably after World War II, when the U.S. is surplusing a bunch of M1 carbines to the public. Somebody says, hey, all of these M1 carbines have 16.25-inch barrels. We just made all of those people we sold them to felons. So, recognizing their mistake, they go back and they amend the NFA to make rifle barrel minimums 16 inches. Shotguns stayed right where they were at 18. That's why we still have that today. So, the next thing that comes around is the Gun Control Act of 1968. Bunch of stuff happens in just a few short years. So, JFK is assassinated, RFK is assassinated, MLK is assassinated. It's largely those things that start to push for gun control, starting in 63 with JFK, but it had been brewing for a little while. There were certainly some other things that happened that gave the pro-gun control side some credence. And they passed what it now is known as the Gun Control Act of 1968. And it establishes a lot of the stuff that we still know and use today. So you can't, it establishes what a prohibited person is, and it's basically a felon. There's a few other things that could make you a prohibited person. An illegal alien originally was a prohibited person, although that's changing now or has changed. Mentally defective, somebody who's been adjudicated as a mentally defective individual, and anyone who was dishonorably discharged from the armed forces. The other thing it established was basically the FFL system, the Federal Firearms License System. Before 1968, you didn't have to have a special license to sell guns. It restricted imports of some certain firearms, so basically foreign-made machine guns, a couple other things. The next big one was the Firearm Owners Protection Act, and that happens in 1986, often referred to nowadays as FOPA. And it sounds like a good thing, and parts of it are a good thing. It lessened restrictions in some places, and it specifically protected individuals crossing state lines with firearms, which is a good thing. Basically, it protects you provided you are just traveling through other states. It's a complicated topic for another time. What it's mostly remembered for, and what Reagan is a lot of times remembered for, aside from his Reaganomics, was it closed the machine gun registry. And the machine gun registry, again, goes back to the original 1934 NFA. There is when you filed for your tax stamp, provided you were going to legally acquire a machine gun, you paid the $200 tax stamp and then registered the firearm. Technically, you didn't register the firearm, you registered the tax stamp, or the tax stamp is the part that's traceable, not the firearm. Debatable. But when the machine gun registry closed in 1986, it meant that no more could be added, and the ones that were there could stay, and they do remain transferable even to this day. So you can go buy a transferable machine gun with a $200 tax stamp. The problem is it creates an artificial market, because now there's a limited quantity of these things and no more can be added to this pool, this quantity of things, and there's a lot of people who really want them. So you'll find that machine guns, are legal U.S. machine guns, are very expensive. You know, an AR-15, that way. I mean, you can get them real cheap nowadays, $500-600 for a not great one. But a real M16 is going to run you 30, 40, 50 grand. A cheap machine gun is $10,000. So that's kind of where that comes from. One thing I did forget to bring up is there was a machine gun amnesty registry, also, I believe, in 68. And basically, it was the government trying to get people to register machine guns that were not previously registered for a number of reasons. A lot of people were afraid. There was a lot of trophies brought home after World War II that were machine guns and weren't registered because people were afraid that if they registered it, then they would get in trouble, because then the government would know that they had a machine gun. And what the amnesty did was, it didn't matter how you acquired the firearm, and it didn't matter that you never registered it. If you registered your machine gun within the amnesty period, then all is forgiven. And that means everything. There were people who stole M16s from U.S. government depots and then went and registered them in the amnesty, and they were allowed to keep them. There is at least one instance of a felon having stolen a machine gun, registered it in the amnesty, and was allowed to keep it. So, interesting there. The next large-scale gun control act was the Assault Weapon Control Act of 1989. And this is largely an import ban, and this is a lot of what collectors today lament, myself included. This is what stopped the import of non-sporting rifles from anywhere in the world. Non-US made, non-sporting rifles could no longer be imported. So when we were getting like real, wrong side, we were getting real G3s and FALs that you can't see, real FN FALs, real HK G3s or HK 91s, things like that. All of that went away, and this is where the parts kit becomes a thing. It's because of this set of laws. This is why we see in the 90s so many sporterized versions of things, like the NHM 91s that came in with thumbhole ugly stocks and stuff like that. It's because they were avoiding features that would make them non-sporting. So that's where all of that stuff comes from. And it establishes a whole list of features that we're going to see again here with the 1994 federal assault weapons ban. And this is where that set of features not only gets expanded upon, but applied to U.S. domestically made products as well. So anything non-sporting was illegal for FFLs to sell. It's a lot more complicated than that. I'm not going to sit here and bore you with it, but it establishes criteria for assault pistols and assault rifles and their legal definitions, and anything with 2 or more of those features could not be sold in the U.S. It also established the original magazine capacity ban. Both rifles and pistols were limited to 10 rounds. Now, to help get this law passed, it had a sunset clause in it. So basically, it said after 10 years, the law will be null and void. And the pro-gun control people used that to kind of say, hey, let's try this, and if it doesn't work, it's going to go away anyway, so don't worry about it. And they were under the impression that, oh, well, when it does sunset, we'll just renew it and it won't be a big deal. Well, in 2004, when it did sunset, nobody wanted to renew it. So, well, that's not true. Most people didn't want to renew it. That's why it didn't get renewed. Unfortunately, this is the basis of what a lot of banned states use today as their criteria for gun control. Specifically Massachusetts, which is I have a lot of experience there. I was in the firearms industry there for a long time. Basically, Massachusetts never took the 94 ban off of the books. It's still in place today. It's awful. A lot of other states do that too. California is similar. It's terrible. Now I live in Texas where it's way better. So, and then there were a plethora of other things between 2004 and now, especially in Massachusetts. But I just wanted to get you up to date on kind of what and where and why. But in the past couple of years, we've had some wins. I'm not saying we're out of the weeds yet, because we're definitely not. But the Bruin decision in 2016 or 18 or whatever that was, the Bruin decision was a big deal. That it set a precedence to secure a lot of what a lot of people already thought were given rights and opportunities. And in the last year, the $200 tax stamp has gone away. Now the tax stamp for all of the things, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, machine guns, suppressors, AOWs, all of it. The tax is now $0. Now, the NFA has been challenged several times in court. And the basis for the challenge is it's unconstitutional. It goes against the Second Amendment, which it does. Let me be very clear about that. It does. But the defense was always, well, it's not a registry of firearms. We're not forcing you to register your firearms. It's what's being tracked is the tax stamp. And because taxes, especially at the time that it was written in 1934, was the Revenue Service, now IRS. Well, it's a tax issue. It's not a firearms issue, so we don't have to deal with it. It's not a Second Amendment violation, blah, 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 blah. Well, now there's no tax. So there's a few large companies that have filed suit against the federal government and are trying to get the NFA off of the books. We'll see how that goes. I think with the tax stamp having gone away and with the advent and proliferation of FRTs, it kind of makes the NFA null and void anyways. Now, the NFA in a modern context is really, really dumb because people have found ways to skirt around it. So it kind of doesn't, it almost doesn't matter anymore. So I'm not saying that it shouldn't go away, because it should. But basically, in the mid-2000s, people found out that you could make pistol versions of rifles that have a short barrel and just don't have a stock. And then, by all legal definitions, it's a pistol. So you can have a short barrel. Well, then it comes to, well, it kind of sucks to shoot without a stock. So let's put a brace on it. It's not a stock, it's a pistol brace. Those originally came about for disabled people so they could basically strap a firearm to their forearm and shoot one-handed. Well, then people took those braces and just started shouldering them. And then there were several court cases about this as well. The ATF decided to try to make millions of Americans felons overnight because that's their favorite thing to do. They went to court, they lost, and pistol braces are legal. So you can have something like this, which is a 10.5-inch barreled AR-15 pattern rifle with a pistol brace. Now, some funky things go along with that. If you were to take that this exact same gun and take this brace off and then put a stock on it, you're a felon. That's 10 years in prison, $250,000 fine, and you'll never own firearms again. The other funny thing is this. This is a vertical front grip. If you take this, legally nothing, this is legally a paperweight, this is a nothing, and you put it on this legal pistol, if you put that right there, boom. If I were to secure that, that makes this a short-barreled rifle. Make that make sense. So then, again, 10 years in prison, $250,000 fine, never own firearms again. It's a little bit ridiculous. The advent of pistol braces has kind of made the short-barreled rifle a moot point. The advent of FRTs have kind of made machine guns a moot point. And with the proliferation of suppressors also hitting the civilian market and in such strides that there's actually competition despite the previous $200 tax stamp. They're in common use. And that's a whole, common use is another debate for a different time. But I think a lot of this, from a practical standpoint, is falling apart. Whether or not the courts are going to back that up, I don't know. I hope they are. And if anybody has any news out there that I'm unaware of, let me know in the comments. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about gun control, the NFA, kind of where it came from, a little bit about where we stand today, and hopefully it all goes away, because you can't see it, but there's a double-barrel shotgun up there that I would love to cut down into the one from Mad Max. So hopefully the NFA goes away. But yeah, that's it. That's all I have for you today. If you made it this far, I appreciate it. Thank you. Like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, as much as it hurts me to say it. And I appreciate you coming out. I'll catch you in the next one.